Today is the Fridays for Future press conference. We would like to thank Cannes International for kindly allowing us to use this slot. We are not representing Cannes, but instead Fridays for Future as a global network and as individuals. We thank them for their solidarity and for giving us this opportunity to showcase the voices of young people from all over the world.
Yeah, it's my turn. Yeah. Okay, welcome everyone. I am Joel Peña. I am Mapuche, and I come from Chile. I want to make indigenous people know that we are rising up our voices and that we recognize their fight at the forefront of the environmental crisis. Buenos días a todos, soy Joel Peña, soy mapuche y vengo de Chile. Quiero hacerles saber a las comunidades indígenas que nuestras voces se están alzando y que reconocemos su lucha frente a la crisis climática. Mari Compuche, Incheta Joel Peña, Incheta Mapuche, Incheta Futa Huapichilhue, Petu Chilcatuquén Inche, Chilcatuquén Choyuen, Guarameu, Huelu Newentu Chepen, Mapuche Tainchin, Wei Chatuquén, Quiñewa Inpuche, Huichap Ain. First of all, we would like to greet each and every activist in the world and also the people who struggle to have a dignified life every day. They are the reason why we keep fighting, even if it could cost us our lives. Also, we want to thank the press, the parties, and every observer for coming and joining us. What happened in Chile and the rest of Latin America is just a symptom of a global problem. Our political and economic model has failed to provide dignity to individuals, cannot rely on market-based solutions to solve the climate crisis. We need to aim for real solutions based in climate justice. That means that all countries, especially countries from the global north, those that contributed to climate change the most and have the means to act, need to increase their ambitions so that we can stay below 1.5 degrees Celsius of global warming. As Fridays for Future, we have sounded the alarm. A massive climate movement is rising. We demand world leaders not to fail us. The climate crisis is here, and this is the time to act. Unless countries present ambitious NDCs in 2020, we will face a future of climate chaos. We cannot afford to miss this chance to make policies that safeguard our own well-being and the livelihood of the next generations. We also have to recognize that there is no chance to tackle the climate crisis without healthy democracies that respect basic human rights. What is happening in Chile, where human rights violations happen every day, needs to be addressed immediately in order to be able to talk about climate action and climate justice. COP25 has left Chile, but as Fridays for Future, we would like to encourage the international community to continue to shed light not only on Chile, where the civil uprising and the following repression from the government is more visible, but also in countries such as Brazil, Mexico, and Colombia, where environmentalists, indigenous leaders, and activists have been trained and persecuted. human rights violations took place in Chile even before the social uprising. This is the case of the communities that are forced to live right next to coal plants. One of our key demands is for Chile to close down all coal plants by 2030, something that the government has not listened to, as they are planning to close them by 2040 and condemn people to another 20 years of suffering. Minister Carolina Smith of Chile, we ask you to tell all those children and families who will have to endure the next 20 years risking their lives, another 20 years of unworthiness, that you are doing everything you can to protect them. We want you to look them in the eyes and tell them that you are being an environmental leader. We would like to point out that COP25 was supposed to focus on Latin American and more especially Chilean uses. Now that the COP is taking place in Madrid, we see that there is no representation of the global south. We hope that for the future, this instance have a greater voice and representation of those who suffer the most from climate change and social inequality, the poor. We understand most politicians and negotiators have never lived in poverty, but we know that impoverished communities are more at risk and that they are the most disadvantaged when it comes to climate adaptations, therefore they must be included. We want the politicians of Latin America and the world to have the courage and empathy that young people have had to confront the climate crisis. We need them to stop persecuting and harming those who fight for a better world.
People, time is running out. If we don't take action in line with scientific facts, our ecosystem will collapse. Politicians all over the world are not only ignoring the climate emergency, but they are leading a war against effective climate action. Instead, they're protecting the interests of the fossil fuel industry, not the interests of millions of workers, and not the interests of millions who are pushed to flee or are left to die from climate disasters. Putting the interests of just a few self-serving people above the interests and the survival of millions, of billions of people is undemocratic, it's criminal, and it's inhuman. There are no signs emissions will decrease. Rich countries do not only emit extremely more greenhouse gases, but they are forcing the whole world to play after their rigged rules. If we want to turn the tide, we will need to change those rules. Otherwise, there's no way of keeping the world below 1.5 degrees global warming. People are already facing deadly natural disasters, especially in the global south. This is climate injustice, because they are not responsible for this crisis we are in. We have to keep fighting. We will keep fighting. And we will keep getting stronger, pushing as hard as we can for real action. We stand in solidarity with all affected communities. We stand in solidarity with those who stood up against this inhuman crisis under much more pressure than we did. And we stand in solidarity with all workers, all women, all indigenous people, and all other groups who are fighting against injustice. Millions of people are standing together. Millions of people on the streets are demanding climate justice. Nevertheless, our political and economic system are advancing the destruction of our planet. Either we stand together as one, and with those who are struggling because of this rigged system. All the people fighting for everything to stay as it is. The people benefiting from this status quo will win.
In spring in Korea, we enjoyed beautiful flowers blooming, and in summer we saw green trees and various insects. In the fall, the leaves were falling, and we could eat delicious seasonal fruits. And in winter, we made snowmen with snow that covered the whole world white. I was sad to see the leaves that fell in winter, but I made the promise for next year. This was natural 15 years ago, but today, spring and fall are disappearing because of the climate crisis. It snows in May, and it does not snow in winter. The students feeling the seriousness of the climate crisis began to act. As part of Friday for Future, on September 27th in Seoul, Korea, students voluntarily refused to go to school and took to the streets for our survivor. Together, we raised our voices to let the public know about the seriousness of the climate crisis. I am grateful to be able to demonstrate legally among Asia. I know that it is a privilege to strike. In many other Asian countries, it's not allowed, and students fear representation if they strike for the climate. In Korea, students use their cell phones to launch a handwritten relay campaign to inform social media about the seriousness about the climate crisis and to conduct a climate crisis hashtag campaign. Through online communication, young people were able to pull together and overcome the constraints of physical distance. Through our strict climate change performance and direct participation in online social media, we're talking about how serious we are. We are in the biggest crisis humanity has ever faced, and we as youth are the biggest victims of the climate crisis. We do everything to fight for a safe and livable future. We ask all people to join the struggle against the climate crisis because we deserve a future. Animals extinct, plants extinct. Who's the next? Thank you.
I come from the island state of Tasmania, from the southernmost community in Australia. My name is Toby. I also come from a country of privilege, knowledge, technology, money, and the possibility to lead a rapid transition to 100% renewable energy by 2030. We have that privilege, but instead, our oceans are warming. The iconic Great Barrier Reef is bleaching. Our country is quite literally on fire, and our Pacific neighbours are sinking. Climate change is affecting every aspect of our lives right now. It is not a future thing. The fossil fuel extraction companies are continuing to place profit and greed over people and ethics. We are not in only a climate emergency, we are in a climate justice emergency. Because those people, like Pacific Islanders, First Nations people, and young people, are going to be and are feeling the worst effects of climate change, even though we have done the least amount to contribute to this problem. The voices of those who must and should be heard and be at the heart of these discussions here at COP25 are being silenced by the politicalisation of this issue. COP25 prides itself on the slogan, "Time for action." That means it's time to move beyond politics, move beyond money and greed and towards a just transition and a global collaborative action right now. As countries continue to emit toxic CO2 into the atmosphere, the oceans continue to warm and rise. In countries like Tuvalu, Fiji, Kiribati, and countless other countries across the globe, they are being engulfed by the sea, and their voices are being silenced by global leaders who are too scared to change their conservative ways. We are here to highlight the impacts of the climate and justice emergency and what it is having upon those countries. In Australia, the Great Barrier Reef, an expansive and unique coral reef, is experiencing continuous bleaching due to temperature increases. A generation ago, an abundance of rainbow coral engulfed the northeastern coast of Australia. Today, the colour has been stripped from the coral, and what remains is slowly dying. The country is on fire, literally. Australia has over 300 kilometres of fire front facing communities all across the country, with over 2 million hectares of land being lost, 673 homes destroyed, as well as 1,400 other buildings. This is climate change. This is the consequence of climate inaction. And I'm so proud to be here today with my generational peers from every single continent to stand together for real climate action, for the first time as a global movement with representatives intercontinentally. It is time for action, and it has been for far too long. And we are here together, and we will continue to strike in solidarity until world leaders not only hear us, but they listen to us.
Hi everybody, I'm Leah from Canada, and since Monday, a question runs through my mind. How do you, Canadian negotiator, feel as you enter in the center every day, smiling, telling us that we, the youth, are the change and that we have to continue to push you to do more? Is it a game? If it is, it's not funny. Today we capitulate. You won. Now you can act for real. After 25 years of that funny and fake international climate regime leading us to an environmental dystopia, we ask you to stop this political game in which Canada has been one of the best players up to now. I live in a country whose economy runs on lives of millions of people from the global south. The wealthier we become, the more our planet is destroyed. And you know what? Our government continues to subsidize fossil fuel industries and to base its economy on land exploitation. In 2019, it's a nonsense, and it's time to stop greenwashing, to stop extracting, to stop colonizing. We call our history the story of success. In only 500 years, we've achieved the discovery of the New World. We've colonized an entire continent. We've imposed our imperialism on indigenous people and communities who were living in harmony with nature. This is not what I call a history of success. We are asking today for a reinvention of the game, that the history of success become the one of decolonization, of just transition, a transition that left no one behind. That our historical responsibility in the creation of the climate crisis leads up to pay for the reparation of that disaster. Canada has to enhance its NDC, and right now, and to plead for a strict mechanism that ensures that Article 6 of the Paris Agreement doesn't harm local and indigenous people and communities. On September 27, we were more than 500,000 people in the streets of Quebec demanding courageous and coherent action. What more does it take? Time for action is the slogan of the COP25. We have made it ours. It is time for you to make it yours. Climate is not a game. We are standing here together to tell you that you can be sure that we won't stop mobilizing, we won't stop striking, and we will strike more and more until you act as leaders, that is, climate leaders. Thank you.
I am Holadosu Adenike from Nigeria. I'm representing Africa. Africa is the most hit by climate crisis. Every day, hundreds of lives are lost. Should we continue to live this way and say all is well? The shrinking of Lake Chad is affecting African peace and security. Climate injustice is a crime to our existence. We cannot wait for 3, 4, or 5 years before we receive adequate finance means for combating our climate crisis. We cannot stay passive while our future is being washed away by climate crisis. The time to act is now. It's time for action and not empty words. Much is needed to be done for Africa. The continent is facing huge crisis. We have been hit by cyclones, the shrinking of Lake Chad, the Congo rainforest, heat wave, and water crisis and others. We must be at the center of every discussion in this conference. The decision we make today are significant for Africa. Every day counts. We deserve a future without the crisis. Today I'm asking, when will Africa be at the center of climate finance? When will Africa be given the much attention needed for solving the climate crisis? There's already a huge gap. We cannot stay back on things that matter to us and the future generations to come. Africa must rise, and the time is now. Remember the discussion world leaders make in this conference. We either make or mar Africa. We, the climate strikers, will continue to fight for our future and climate justice. We'll be present for the whole COP25. We cannot be quiet about those things that matters to us. Now is the time. We have less than 11 years to act on climate crisis. If we do not see any improvements, we will continue to fight for our planet. We will host a second pre-conference next week to announce our next step of international climate strike movements. Every COP conference matters towards climate justice, and every decision we make today matters to the future we want. Thank you.
So we're out of time now, but we just have one thing to the side real quick.
Hello. My name is Takaya Blaney. This is Kaylila Rampanen. We are from the northwest coast of Turtle Island, and we would like to share our perspective as Indigenous youth within Canada. As Indigenous youth, we are in the front lines of climate justice, and we are also in the front lines of fighting it. While 20,000 gather for COP25, Indigenous youth right now confront raids, industry workers, police brutality, and the militarization of our lands in the name of oil and gas. Many of us could not attend COP25 because of the threat of invasion from fossil fuel development requires us to remain and defend our lands. We, the Indigenous youth, stand between industrial megaprojects like Tech Mine, Coastal GasLink Pipeline, Trans Mountain Pipeline, Line 3, and the lands they would destroy. We stand to prevent the tremendous carbon output these projects would contribute to climate change. We, the Indigenous youth, do not have a choice but to act. We cannot survive without our land. While Canada claims to uphold reconciliation, my relatives facing invasions of our lands from fossil fuel development have been waiting for Canada's sentiments to finally change their treatment of us. There can be no reconciliation while Canada brutalizes our women and our youth in the name of pipelines, meanwhile claiming to be a climate leader. There can be no reconciliation while Canada refuses to push for the recognition of Indigenous rights in Article 6. Climate solutions cannot maintain the status quo of Indigenous genocide. This isn't just about the protection of our people. This is about the fact that climate solutions that allow for Indigenous lands to be appropriated as carbon offsets simply do not work. Our rights as stewards of the land need to be respected. There is no climate justice without Indigenous justice. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.